Here's what I know. Some of us are addicted to alcohol. Some of us are addicted to drugs. Some of us are addicted to speed, pace. Some of us are addicted to winning. Power grabs a lot of us. Sex grabs a lot of us. And for many of us, it's food. And I'm in that category. Food is something I have gone to many times in my life to celebrate wins, celebrate losses, celebrate whatever. Gone to when I'm not good, gone to when I'm very good, gone to it when whatever. It's the place I have gone to, and I'm not unique in that. The notion of food noise is something I'd never heard of before. And I recently have learned this, that food noise is a thing for people like me, i.e., we think a lot about food and when and how we're going to have it. In the last 2 years, there's been a lot of noise about Ozempic, Mounjaro, GLP-1 drugs. Every celebrity seems to be doing it. When you're listening to the Emmys and Oscar award ceremonies, they proudly share their stories about that. What struck me about it, there's a lot of talk about Ozempic, Mounjaro, and those drugs, celebrities and women. And I wanted to hear from an expert about GLP-1 drugs and men. Why do we have them? What are they for? How will they help us? What are the good sides? What are the bad sides? I've invited Dr. Angela Kwong onto our show today. She is an expert in metabolic diseases, and she's an expert in medically supervised weight loss. At the end of the conversation, I'm going to share with you some reflections I have on our conversation, and maybe one or two things to go away and think about or experiment with. But welcome to Angela.
Where does this relationship with food stem from? Sometimes what worked in your 20s or 30s won't necessarily work in your 40s and 50s, even if you have done the exact same thing.
Dr. Angela Kwong is redefining how we approach weight management. Angela is the founder of Enlighten, a medically supervised weight loss program, delivering stigma-free, evidence-based, multidisciplinary care for patients across Australia. In 2025, Enlighten was named winner of the Outstanding Patient Education Award at the Patients Australia Awards Gala. Angela is taking on weight loss, life changes, and demystifying the new wave of weight loss drugs.
They assume that everyone who takes the medication is going to be having issues with nausea, issues with reflux, issues with constipation, issues with their libido. And so it can really polarize people because they're exposed to only the people who make noise with their experience with the medication.
For many of us in midlife, we are looking to transition to something else, and a lot of us might be scared of taking that step towards something new.
Sometimes you have to remember that people who love and protect you are doing that because they love you and because they want to protect you. But if you have a really strong purpose, you have to listen to your own heart.
From our studio in Jones Bay Wharf, Sydney, here's Pod O'Sullivan with Don't Let the Old Man In, a podcast from the Wisdom Vault.
Let's start here. A quote from the Australian Weekend magazine said, Jeremy Clarkson of Top Gear fame experienced severe projectile vomiting several times a day when he went on to a GLP-1 drug. And a general practitioner doctor in Perth was quoted in the same article as saying, it's common for patients to be so afflicted by diarrhea that Jackson Pollock would have been proud to paint. Jackson Pollock being the American painter famous for his splatter painting. Now, it's a graphic image to start with, Dr. Angela Kwong. But what are GLP-1s and what is their role in treating diabetes and obesity?
Yeah, so GLP-1 stand for glucagon-like peptide 1 medications, and they've been around for the last couple of years, and they have been sensationalized, they've been growing in popularity, and they're also a very exciting medication in terms of treating diabetes. I think in the media, they have been heavily promoted for weight loss, and that's why we've had a lot of medication shortages as well. And it's because when it comes to weight loss, we haven't really had much in this space. You know, we've had oral medication, we have had lifestyle changes, we've had bariatric surgery, but we haven't had something in between between people making a lifestyle change and then committing to a surgical change. So it makes sense as to why people have been jumping on the bandwagon, wanting to learn about GLP-1s.
And what do they do?
They do a couple of things. So from a diabetes perspective, they work at the level of the brain, they reduce your appetite, they reduce your food noise. At the level of the stomach, they slow down your digestion, they make everything move in slow motion. At the level of the pancreas, they're increasing your insulin excretion. So they help you to metabolize your sugars better. So that's how they work as a diabetes type medication. But also, they're very effective in helping people to lose weight. And that's key here. So that's the reason why they have also been registered as weight management medications.
Which wasn't the original plan, but it's
No.
become a really useful and popular side effect.
Definitely. And that's how some medications have been invented, actually. They've been designed for something else, but we found another side effect for which they're actually gaining popularity for.
You mentioned insulin and glucose, and I think most of listeners would understand there's a relationship between the two, and it's an important relationship, but what it is fuzzy.
Yes.
Can you explain the relationship between those two hormones?
Yeah, definitely. So glucose is an energy source. We get glucose when we're eating food and it gives us energy. Our brain actually needs glucose for us to function and for us to think. Insulin can be thought of as something that helps to break down glucose and make that energy useful. Now, something that I want to make as a teaching point is that, we are a little bit reactive in general practice, and we are a little bit slow in general practice, where sometimes we're just testing patients for their fasting glucose levels once or twice a year, checking to see whether they have diabetes. So we're checking if they have diabetes because we want to make sure that they don't have diabetic complications. We're trying to prevent people from having heart disease, stroke, nerve problems, kidney problems. But actually, before patients even have diabetes, they can have pre-diabetic states. They can have pre-diabetes, they can have insulin resistance, they can have pre-insulin resistant states. So some of the things that I've been trying to teach the general public and also health professionals is actually we need to think about diabetes as being on a spectrum of insulin resistance, and we need to be thinking about this a little bit earlier.
We can come to this later, but one of the reasons why you and I met originally was because of pre-diabetes. I was recommended to come and, in fact, one of our mutual colleagues said to me, she's the smartest doctor I've ever met. You should go and talk to her. I'm glad I did. We'll come back to that. You're basically talking about metabolism.
Yes.
And how we take in energy, how we use energy, so metabolize the energy to keep our body moving, etc.
Yes.
One of the things I've learned in the last couple of years is our metabolism changes, particularly around midlife, and then it increases as we get older. And the way we take in energy, or indeed the way we use energy, or the needs we have for energy changes.
Yes.
Can you explain what that is? Because I think that might help understand why some of us then change our weight or put on weight as we get older.
Yeah. So sometimes I get patients and they say to me, I've been really diligent recently. So I've actually been going to the gym 4 days a week. I've been eating really clean. And in the past, I'd been able to lose 5 kilos really easily. But for some reason, I'm not getting any results and my weight is really reaching a plateau. Like, what's actually going on? I'm being so good, Dr. Angela. And I say to them,
I'm sure they say with that voice as well.
I say to them, sometimes what worked in your 20s or 30s won't necessarily work in your 40s and 50s, even if you have done the exact same thing. And it has got to do with a couple of things. So number one, your metabolic rate is going to be different when you're older. Your muscle mass is going to be different when you're older as well. But also when you have put stresses on your body in the past, when you have been really diligent in cutting down your calories, when you have been exercising really hard, the body knows that. And that's something called the body weight set point. And it knows that it's about to go into a starvation mode, and it tries to restrict its energy and just save it for all the important things. The important things being the brain and the heart. So it will slow down its metabolism when the energy sources are sparse. So it recognizes exactly what you're doing when you're being very diligent, cutting your calories. You're again being very diligent with increasing your exercise, and it's trying to preserve those energy sources. And as a result, yes, what you have noticed is that your metabolism is very, very sluggish. So yeah, it is a combination of a couple of things. Number one, your age is a bit different. Number two, your metabolism is naturally a bit lower as you are older.
And,
But
and,
number
and
three,
lower mean the rate that you use your energy and change energy, or that slows down. That's what you mean by
correct,
metabolic
yeah.
rate. Yeah.
So all of the natural sources that you would normally use your energy for, eating, sleeping, going to work, all of those things that you would normally be using your energy for is going to be going at a slightly slower rate. So it makes sense as to why things that did work before are not necessarily working now. And sometimes we need to change things up and give the body a challenge in order to really kickstart the weight loss journey.
Okay. Which is why GLP-1s have become an important part of that thinking process. I'll talk about dieting soon because that's what everyone knows
Yeah.
and has tried in different ways. But yeah, when I think about blockbuster drugs, we had statins for cholesterol, Prozac, Viagra. They're the kind of the big known drugs. I'm imagining the GLP-1s are now in that category. Like
Yes.
when you know that one of the European countries GDP is smaller than one pharmaceutical company in the same country, that's a blockbuster drug, right? And I read the other day that United Airlines have published something where they go, if we can get not necessarily all our passengers onto a drug, if our passengers were to lose 4 kilos on average per
Yes.
passenger, would save them $120 million a year in fuel.
It's the equivalent of not taking any luggage.
Correct. That's exactly right. So there's a benefit here that goes way beyond the individual. Explain to us some of the basic stuff for those of us who don't understand. You use the word off-label. There's an off-label
Yes.
prescription. What does off-label mean?
Yeah, so when the medications were first brought out, they were designed for patients who had diabetes. And that meant that patients who were using it for other reasons, so patients who did not yet meet the criteria for diabetes, but might have been pre-diabetic, or patients who might have been insulin resistant, didn't yet meet the criteria to be prescribed those GLP-1 medications. And so we were prescribing them off-label. We assessed those patients as clinically needing the GLP-1 and having an indication and that they would benefit from those medications. And so we wrote a script, but they didn't necessarily have a subsidized benefit for those medications. It meant that those patients could still access those medications, but they had to pay out of pocket for those medications.
Which is why they're so expensive in different countries because of the off-label component.
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
right. Right, so this potential society, even ethical question then, isn't there, in
Yeah.
terms of the cost and who can access them?
Definitely. And, in Australia, things have changed somewhat. So when we have had shortages of the medication, it's made it even harder. And it's also created a little bit of stigma because some of the patients who have gone to the pharmacy wanting to fill the script, which is not for diabetes, but because they need it for insulin resistance or pre-diabetes, sometimes they're looked down upon by the pharmacist and said, wait, you don't have a script for diabetes. You don't deserve it like someone else. And so they're, how do you think that those patients feel? They're like, I'm just trying to do something good for my health. My blood tests have been borderline for such a long time. I'm almost got, multiple chronic diseases, high blood pressure, high cholesterol. How long do you want me to wait? A couple of years before I come back for this medication? It's completely unfair. And it's just because, of the issues that we've had with the shortages that a lot of these patients have really suffered in the community.
You said earlier on the media has amplified the weight loss side of the benefits, and there's so many stories about all the benefits. When you watch the Oscars or Emmy Awards on TV, and famous actresses are talking about the impacts they're having, then you've hit mainstream. Some of the side effects are probably less known, and I read in an interview recently someone talking about now in their case they use Ozempic, that's what the drug that they were on, that I crave nothing, my libido has bombed, I was into wine and cheese, now brie, Chardonnay, yuck, you couldn't pay me to drink that stuff. The kids were having sticky pork buns and I had to leave the room. That's a pretty big side effect.
Yeah, it is. And, when patients hear of celebrities having those kind of side effects, it can do one of two things. It can either make them really curious and want to learn more because they are really needing a appetite suppressant. They think that they have way too big of an appetite. They need that food noise, and it really attracts them to having a quick solution. Or on the other hand, they think that this medication is full of trouble, and they assume that everyone who takes the medication is going to be having issues with nausea, issues with reflux, issues with constipation, issues with their libido. And so it can really polarize people because they're exposed to only the people who make noise with their experience with the medication.
I'd also read, which really surprised me, but I'm interested to know if you've come across this, Professor Hamdorf, who was a bariatric surgeon in Western Australia, and he talked about this notion of bariatric divorce, where he said people splitting up. He said, I can almost predict which couples will split up. That seems a pretty extreme impact. I'm imagining it's got relatively little to do with the intervention and more to do with the relationship.
Yeah.
But have you come across that?
Well, actually, in my program, in my cohort of patients who I've looked after, I have had one patient who has gone through a divorce since going on the GLP-1s. But I think that even early on in the program, I had a feeling that their relationship wasn't 100% even before that. And I have a feeling that when they were going through the motions, improving their health, improving their weight, there are a lot of secondary benefits that patients have when they improve their weight. It improves their self-esteem. They have time to improve their relationship with food, improve their lifestyle, get into a routine of looking after themselves. And sometimes it just gives them that mental clarity, and they can start to make other decisions in their life as well.
Yes, I would imagine there's some pre-existing tremors or fissures that are now being pushed open because of a new intervention of some kind. Yeah, that makes sense. On the other side, I read a study from a trial at the Texas Health Science Center in 2021, which really surprised me, and I'd be keen to hear what you think of this. What it said was patients who were trying to stop smoking, 27% of smokers who just took on nicotine patches stopped. However, smokers who were taking the nicotine patches who also took a weekly injection jumped up to 46% stopping. That's almost like a 70% increase. What's happening there?
Yeah, so that's a really interesting finding. And we are finding that patients who have some form of addiction tend to find things not so pleasurable and not so fun. Now, when we have a look at the other medications in the weight loss space, before we had the GLP-1s, we did also have another oral medication which also worked on that pathway.
Right.
So interestingly, we had one that contained naltrexone and bupropion. Now, bupropion is a old school antidepressant, and naltrexone is something that we use for opioid dependence. And when I used to prescribe this medication, I used to try and screen patients to see if they had any addictive tendencies. So I'd ask patients, when you wake up first thing in the morning, do you feel like a coffee, or do you feel like a glass of wine, or do you feel like you need to have a smoke? Sometimes I'd ask them, like, how many coffees do you need to get through the day in order to be able to function? So I'd ask them a couple of questions to see, like, what quantity of certain things they needed in order to be able to get through their day. And was there some tolerance? Was there some dependence? Were there any addictive qualities? Now I'm starting to use the same kind of questioning technique to see whether there's any of these features and what happens with their journey when I'm prescribing the GLP-1. And I've noticed a couple of similar things as well. So, for example, some of my patients who used to enjoy not one glass of wine, but maybe a bottle of wine at dinner time, they'll say to me, I can't even finish a couple of sips of my wine. I don't even want to open the bottle. It's just not fun anymore, and this used to be a social thing for them. They used to enjoy a lovely glass of wine at dinner or at social gatherings. And now for them, they're not that hungry. It doesn't taste the same. Their taste buds find everything quite strong, and it's just not a fun activity. They can find other fun activities, which is good, but all of these things that used to be quite addictive for them isn't quite so much anymore.
So this goes back to one of your earlier points, is that drugs are often researched for a particular outcome, but we discover other pathways and outcomes. So this is it possible then that GLP-1s could be used for a range of different addictions over time?
Definitely. I think there's a lot of promise.
Wow, that's exciting.
Yeah.
You mentioned questioning techniques. When I first met you and discovered what your business is and what you do and the program that you run, which we'll talk about in more detail, I'm sure, one of the things that really intrigued me and interested me was your questioning around relationship to food, but also historical relationships to food. And I remember you asking in a group conversation, did you ever feel rewarded for food, or was there any pleasurable, emotional validation for you, I think was the word you used. And the whole notion of this thing called the Mesolympic pathway, which I hadn't come across before as being a reward mechanism. Can you talk to us about what that is and why it impacts different people in different ways?
Yeah, I'm happy to answer that. And it's funny that you bring that up because when I've been running this, multidisciplinary approach to weight management, I often have people outside of the program ask me, yeah, Angela, you have GPs, you have a nutrition, you have exercise. Where's the psychologist in your team? And I say, well, actually, I don't have a traditional psychologist who specializes in depression, anxiety, PTSD, or any of the other specialties when it comes to psychology, not because I don't like psychologists or need a psychologist, but because when it comes to psychology and weight and psychology and food, there's a lot of particular screening that we can do from a general practice perspective. And if patients need additional work, there's only so much that we can do in the program before I refer them off to have their own individual psychology consultations. So we can do a lot in the program, and then sometimes patients need independent psychological support as well. And that's the thing that we are covering. So we are covering, where does this relationship with food stem from? Because, taking a GLP-1, which affects your appetite, which affects your food noise, which affects your digestion, will never actually fix your relationship with food. And it's never going to address any traumas or any past relationships with your food. Whether you are someone who was told to sit down, you're not allowed to move from the dining table until you finish your plate, or if you are someone who was always celebrated when you have excess of food on the dining table, or if you're someone who grew up in a poorer household and food was actually something to be celebrated because that's just the way that your childhood was. For a lot of people, food is pleasure, food is celebration, food is a novelty, food helps with pain, food helps when you're tired, food helps when you've had a really bad day, food assists with so many cravings that are not actually nutrition. Food is energy, but food actually is being used for so many other things. And so yeah, I think that for a lot of people, they don't realize that. And many people come to me and they say, I have so many cravings, I need an appetite suppressant. And so I sit down and have a consultation with them and I say, let's find out what it is that we really need to address here. Because at the end of the day, yes, we can use a bit of GLP-1 or we can use any kind of medications to kickstart you and start to reduce that food noise so that we can have a conversation and we can start to work on this. But at the end of the day, we really need to identify and create some tools so that you can be able to address this in the long term and you can implement it yourself so that you can, create some sustainable change.
Having watched you do your work, and you and I've chatted about this over time, I would say you take a deeply psychological approach, and I remember saying to you once, you're almost like this extraordinary salesperson, the way you ask questions to figure out what is this person needing and wanting, but you do it through the medical lens, as opposed to let me prescribe you something, which is what a lot of people start with. That's not your starting point. Your starting point is what's the root cause going on here, and how do we figure different pathways into awareness of the root cause?
Yeah, and that's the exact reason why I created the program, because I was actually sick and tired of and didn't really want to just prescribe and give out scripts and just give referrals to divert the patients to see bariatric surgeons or to see allied health. I really wanted to help patients figure out the root cause for their weight gain and then use my general practice skills to address those problems and then try and create a subspecialty team that helped them to implement the changes that they need so they wouldn't need me forever. They would be able to graduate from my care and look after themselves. Yeah.
I'm just going to pause for 1 second. If you've got this far, that means you must be enjoying the show. Thank you for watching. We have a plan to build out a whole lot more shows just like this. And to do so, we need your help. The platform amplifies shows that have higher eyeballs and subscriptions. So to help us attract guests that you will find very interesting, please press like and subscribe. That way, we can attract the guests that you want, and we won't let the old man in. Now, on with the show. So, as I mentioned earlier on, a mutual friend of ours suggested I meet with you, and I trialed Ozempic and I didn't like it. It didn't work. I was nauseated the whole time, and we stopped it. So that part didn't work. But one of the key things I learned, which completely shocked me and still does, and now that a few of my friends are trialing different interventions, we all have a similar conversation, which goes like this. Have you heard of food noise? You have? Wow. What's it like for you? I had no idea I even had it. Now it's going. Tell us what food noise is and why is it so impactful for so many of us?
Yeah. Food noise is one of those things that you don't realize you had until it's gone. So until one day you open up your fridge or you open up your cupboard and you realize it's full and you haven't thought about food for the entire day. And you realize that, oh my gosh, I used to spend so much time around the clock thinking about food. So first thing in the morning, I'd be thinking about making my coffee. And then around 11 o'clock, I'd be thinking, oh gosh, is it lunchtime yet? And then at lunchtime, you'd be thinking, oh, I wonder if they have my favorite thing downstairs. And then you'd also be thinking, oh, I should be really thinking about putting some healthy things on my shopping list so I don't order out when it comes to dinner time. And then at dinner time, you feel really bad with yourself that you ordered something quick and easy for dinner time and you should have planned to have something quick and healthy. And it's just on and on and on with thinking about food, planning for food, trying to be healthy, being guilty with yourself, and circling on all of this time. In the meantime, you still got all these other responsibilities. You got to pick up the kids, do the groceries, go to work, exercise, look after yourself, but you've got this constant energy. And so that's what we call food noise. Food noise is that constant chatter in your brain. And when patients take GLP-1s, often it is, around the first week or the second week that they realize that it kicks in because, like I said, they open the fridge or they open the pantry and they just realize, it's 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I forgot to eat. I haven't been thinking about food the entire time, and my fridge or my cupboard is still empty, and it's not the end of the week yet. And then they realize this is what everyone has been talking about when it comes to food noise. I might have been one of those people that first wanted to take a GLP-1 because I wanted to reduce my appetite, but actually for the very first time in my life, I can have a deep breath and think about how I can plan out something healthy for my next shopping list.
One of my mates said to me, when he realized about food noise, he said, it hit me after about the second or third week. It's Tuesday and I'm not planning what I'm eating on Saturday and Sunday yet. So that's the first time in 20 years that I haven't been thinking what I'm planning to eat.
Yeah.
And he said, I just assumed that we're all doing that. And there's a gang of us having this conversation. Let's say there's 8 of us, I can't remember how many. And 3 of us had either been on or were currently on one of the GLP-1 drugs, and the other 4 or 5 had never been on them and had no need to. Yeah. And the other 4 or 5 were completely shocked that 3 of us were going, yes, food noise is a thing. Well, it was a thing. It no longer is a thing. And hallelujah. I actually think, I've been thinking about this. I reckon it is similar to the internal continual narrative that imposter syndrome has as well. Like it's a very similar internal chatter that you don't realize is there until it's decreasing or it's gone.
Yeah. Yeah. Am I good enough? Are they going to find out about me? What if I make a mistake? What if I don't show up? I think that it's very similar. Yeah.
Um, let's move to you, the entrepreneur.
Okay.
Yeah, 'cause that's such a cool and interesting story. As I said already, one of our mutual friends and colleagues introduced me to you originally, and why I was so interested in meeting you originally was his phrase, "Oh, she's the smartest doctor I've ever met." Now, there's a lot of smart doctors out there. This person is quite smart in his own right, so I was intrigued by that. You are Australian,
Yes.
of Chinese parents, migrants who,
Yes.
as I remember it, moved to rural New South Wales to set up a Chinese restaurant.
Correct.
Is that correct?
Yes.
And so the idea of you going to university to become a doctor in itself would be an unusual move.
Yes. Correct.
You leaving traditional medicine to set up an internet-based business would be an extraordinary unusual move.
It was very frowned upon.
Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I was the Asian dream, moving into medicine, becoming a GP, working in the clinic, and being very well respected in the community. In Chinese tradition, we call this having face. It means that my parents get to brag to all of their friends and family that my daughter is a doctor, she's a well respected GP. You can ask her all the questions at the parties. I did not like doing that, by the way.
My ankle is sore. Can you chat to
Everyone
me?
comes up to me and says, "Will you come check out my rash? I brought my Medicare card." It's always fun inviting Angela to all your family parties. But that was their fun thing, being able to be proud of me for being a GP. And then it all came crashing down because I wanted to do something a little bit different. You know, I had been in GP land for a good number of years. I was seeing more patients coming to see me for weight management. And like I said, I felt a little bit stuck in the community in that as a GP, all that I could do was prescribe medications or refer patients out for bariatric surgery or refer them out for allied health. And I really felt that I had a bit more to offer. I wanted to give patients a lot more patient education, but I wanted to help them implement the lifestyle skills that they needed in the long term rather than just telling people what to do. So that's the reason why I created a multidisciplinary weight management program so I could help people identify the root cause for their weight gain, whether it was that they had any pre-metabolic states like insulin resistance, pre-diabetes, it was their relationship with food, they needed to improve their nutrition, whatever the underlying factors was, I was going to help people understand that and address it while we help them to implement weekly nutrition, weekly exercise. Now, this was actually at the time of COVID, and I was thinking, you know what? A weight loss program could be done by telehealth, and I'm going to have a very relaxing side gig. So that was actually my plan. And it was for me to have a relaxing telehealth side gig, but it didn't last as a relaxing side gig for very long. And my parents saw me emerge into what they call an internet doctor.
That went down well, no doubt.
Yeah, that went down very well. And for quite a few years, the very first few years of me doing this online weight loss program, they tried to convince me to go back to general practice. It's like, this is not good face in Chinese to be an internet doctor. You should really be going back to the GP clinic. After a while that I was running this, the popularity soared. Because of word of mouth, we had more patients joining the program. And then I felt like there was more that I could do again. So I felt like I was prescribing a lot of GLP-1s. Patients were having issues with gut side effects. They were having issues with their nutrition. And that's what led me to formulate my own protein powder that also had prebiotics, probiotics, daily greens and vitamins and minerals, and that's now called the Enlighten Me Shake. And it's only been since, well, I would say the Enlighten Me Shake's been out for about a year now, and the program is almost at 3 years, and we've started to have some success that my parents have started to come around and say, actually, my daughter runs a national weight management program and has her own product. So things have started to change. Not that it matters to me too much what other people think. For me, it's always been about wanting to do something more meaningful for my patients so that they can have a better outcome. It was never even supposed to be a or two businesses. It was actually to solve a specific clinical problem.
I want to jump to your business and your protein shake because, as you know, I was one of the first people to get to trial it, and
Yes.
I have it almost every day, which is really, I really appreciate it. But I also want to go back to the entrepreneur question a second. You wanted to do something, and yet the people around you didn't stop you, but there was a resistance to you doing it. You could easily have stopped.
Yes.
And for many of us in midlife, we are looking to transition to something else, and a lot of us might be scared of taking that step towards something new.
Yeah.
You're not in midlife, you're a lot younger than I am, but you still made that step.
Yeah.
Can you just share with me the thinking process that you went through to help you stay focused on the problem you're trying to solve, as opposed to listen to the very caring, I'm sure,
Yeah.
but not aligned
Yes.
ecosystem that you're part of?
Yeah. I think that's a really good point, because when I was creating the first business, which was the online program, I made a lot of decisions in that program, and a lot of them I made with clinical integrity. So, what I mean by that is I decided to make a program for patients, and because it's for patients, I didn't want to have to jump through any hoops. So I wanted it to be easily accessible. I didn't want patients to have to be limited to only seeing me in Sydney. I want it to be available to patients all over rural and remote Australia to access me through Zoom and online. And because of that, I decided to just make it a private fee so that anyone could access me. We didn't have to jump through hoops with Medicare rebates. We didn't have to wait for any government grants. We didn't have to do any private health insurance. And so many people who I talked to about this before I created the program actually told me to not do it. So they're like, I think that you're going to fail when it comes to this business. Who is going to join a private program, pay for it themselves? Don't you know that there's lots of bulk billing medical centers where people could go and get a script for a GLP-1? Why would they pay out of pocket? They can't get any private health insurance rebates. I think you're crazy. And you got to remember that at the end of the day, the people who care about you the most, your friends, your families, your loved ones, the reasons why they say these things is because they love you and they want to protect you.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, the reason why you want to do this is because you have a really strong sense of purpose. And if your sense of purpose is that strong and the decisions that you make have very good integrity, like the reasons why I made that financial decision to just make it private was so that I could service everybody. And if I wanted to make it accessible to everybody, it just had to be private, then so be it. And let's just see who joins the program. And at the end of the day, I think that that has what has led to its success. It has been an accessible online program. People all over Australia, no matter how rural or remote they are, they can access a specialized multidisciplinary weight management service. And they don't mind having to pay, because sometimes it means that they can access their weight management GP easily and within a week, rather than having to wait to see their GP 2 months down the track. So I think some of the decisions that I made have been the right decision, despite the noise and despite the naysayers. And sometimes you have to remember that people who love and protect you are doing that because they love you and because they want to protect you. But if you have a really strong purpose, you have to listen to your own heart.
Yeah. Which you have. Tell me about some of your patients who come onto your program. Like, who is a typical patient, and what is the success story that they go through? And I know you're a very evidence-based, data-driven practitioner, so it's not just hoopla stories. You actually have a lot of data to share that.
Yeah. So I would say that about 70% of my patients are females, usually aged between 30 to 55 years old. And that's because I speak at a lot of conferences talking about women having perimenopausal weight gain. It is a significant group of people who are quite ignored and are not recognized for the metabolic changes that they're going through. Women who go through perimenopause, They recognize that they're going through hot flushes. They recognize that they're going through mood changes, through irritability, through thermoregulation issues. But what they often don't recognize is that they do go through shape changes, such as having increased visceral fat. And that's often because they're going through a rapid period of insulin resistance. But no one ever says that. And when they go to get help from their GP, they're often just told to go and eat less and move more. They're not actually tested. So when I go and speak at medical conferences, when I go and promote it on my social media, it's the very first time that someone has acknowledged that there is a hormonal change that's happening and it's resulting in a metabolic change, and they feel validated and listened to. And that's the reason why I attract a lot of that cohort into my program. Another group that I attract into my program are younger women who have polycystic ovarian syndrome for a very similar reason, because polycystic ovarian syndrome is unfortunately in the community still seen as a reproductive problem, a problem of the ovaries, but not recognized as an early metabolic issue that can increase your risk of high blood pressure, diabetes, and problems with your weight later in life. And then, of course, I have the mixed bag, the other 30%, which can include my men, my ex-bodybuilders, people who have gone through chemotherapy, or people who have had medication-induced weight gain. So I've got a mixed bag of other people who have had other reasons which have caused them to gain weight, and they're all treated in different ways. In terms of the data, the research shows that any intervention that you do, we normally aim for 5 to 10% over 4 months. But with my program, because we are doing medical weight loss, exercise, nutrition, all at the same time, the average patient is losing about 15 to 18% over 4 months when we look at the entire cohort.
That's an extraordinary outcome, isn't it?
It is. It is.
Are there any core insights or self-awareness learnings that are common across the group?
Yeah, there's a couple of core insights. I'll give you the top 3. The first one would be that, of the really successful graduates who are achieving their goal weight and keeping the weight off, number 1, they're not focusing on the little things. They're keeping a really broad view. So what I mean by that is that they know not to weigh themselves daily or weigh themselves every week or just focus on the kilograms lost. They know that when it comes to their weight, it's also important to be thinking about their shape. So they're also doing waist circumference measurements or taking body photos and knowing that, kilograms lost is going to be impressive at the beginning, but not impressive towards the later end of the weight loss journey. And so taking a more broader view and not panicking about, the small incremental changes, but taking a much broader view. The other attribute that I notice is that they are good students and they take a protein first approach. So not just being good when they're in the program and eating their protein target during that time, but they know that for the majority of us, we're under eating our protein. And so they're always taking a protein first approach. So at breakfast, it's eggs on toast. At lunchtime, it's a tuna sandwich. At dinner time, it's steak and veggie. So every meal, we're always thinking about the protein first. And it's not just about being good now, it's about carrying on those habits into the long term.
It's interesting that you use the phrase, it's not about being good, it's about habits.
It is.
That's a very different mind thinking, because if I take what you just said, for many people then the idea would have been, if I'm having eggs or tuna or chicken, that's being good.
Yes.
As opposed to, no, that's actually the new version of you.
It is.
It's a very different way of thinking, isn't it?
It is. And then the third thing that is really important is understanding that your medical conditions are conditions. And if, say, for example, you're someone who has had your insulin resistance treated, or you've had your pre-diabetes treated, and now you are at your goal weight, it doesn't mean that you are perfect now and you've reversed your pre-diabetes or you've reversed your insulin resistance. It means right now you have lifestyle controlled insulin resistance, or you have lifestyle controlled pre-diabetes. And we need to maintain that lifestyle control with all of the things that we've been learning. So we need to keep down our stress levels, eat well, exercise well, and monitor that condition. It doesn't mean that you're free off the hook and you get to go and party and do everything all the time. We need to maintain that focus that you are someone who has had risk factors for this condition, whether it is your genetics, whether it is what other factors, and we need to keep that mindset that we need to monitor and we need to maintain all of that skill set.
Well, I know that I'm due for a checkup with you very soon, but I have been monitoring blood tests and blood sugars and blood pressures, and they're all back to normal. So I'm heading into the normal lifestyle factor again, but I'm not off the hook, apparently.
Sounds good.
Your organization is becoming really well known in the last last 18 months. You won several awards. Emerging Entrepreneur of the Year in Women's Agenda in 2024, finalist in the Women Leading Tech Awards, the Outstanding Patient Education Award in 2025, and there's more, I know that. What's it like to now be recognized as an entrepreneur for your medical interventions?
It is a huge honor, and also I don't yet feel ready to call myself an entrepreneur, if I must say, and I think I've always said this to you.
Yeah.
I don't feel like I've earned the label of calling myself an entrepreneur, because I genuinely feel that I'm a clinician who just wants to solve a problem for my patients. For me, I have started to accept that I am an emerging entrepreneur. So I am someone who sees a problem, can't let it go, wants to try so very hard to think about the problem so deeply and create a solution custom to that population so that they are going to be able to solve it on a very easy level. So I've realized, yes, I am innovating and I am in some ways emerging to be an entrepreneur. But also for me to be an entrepreneur, I also need to have space. So when you're running two businesses and you're doing absolutely everything, so you're doing the marketing, you're running the team, you're doing a bit of the IT, you're doing all of the emails. For me to take place and to be able to call myself an entrepreneur, I need to also make sure that I step into the leadership space and I'm not doing all of the little things. So I think I'm going to be ready to call myself an entrepreneur when I have all of that mental space, because I have actually created a team that is somewhat running itself.
I remember, if I could share this, I remember the moment I knew you were going to become a really great entrepreneur. You and I had a conversation a couple of years ago. You were sharing all these different ideas that you had, and we were in a conversation about the ideas, and I remember just said, let me tell you a story about Steve Jobs.
I remember this.
Where he was asked about what are the greatest Apple products, and he said all the ones we said no to, because that allowed us to create the ones we did.
Yes.
And if we hadn't said no, we would have not been able to do this. And I think that's all I said, and you went, got it. And you went, okay, I'm shutting all this down and I'm focusing on here. And
Yes.
You've done that brilliantly. And so that notion of thinking deeply about the problem I'm trying to solve is one of the core attributes of great entrepreneurs.
And actually, every time someone asks me, what's your third business going to be? I shut them down with that Steve Jobs quote.
Oh, do you?
Smart now. So no, I have to do a very good job with my program and a very good job with my shakes first.
Well, clearly on the awards that you're winning, and as a user of your shakes, which are over there in the corner, you're doing a great job already. Fantastic.
Thank you.
Let's move to something really practical for folks listening. When I lived in the UK, there's a thing called the MOT test, which is when you get your car serviced. What would an annual midlife MOT review be in your minds? If you were to design the perfect midlife review or assessment, what would that look like?
I've got a couple of things that would be on my wish list. The first thing would be to measure a patient's waist circumference, because I don't think that it's done often enough. And I think that everyone is happy to hop on the scales, but we don't actually think about measuring the waist circumference. And it's so much more meaningful than our weight. Our weight can fluctuate from so many things. It can fluctuate from last night's salty dinner. It can also fluctuate depending on how constipated we are or how many, jackets or clothing that we're wearing when we're going to the doctor's surgery. But our waist circumference tells us so much about the visceral fat that we're carrying, and a healthy waist circumference, once you've reached that, is really, really important. So I would love to have my patients' waist circumference. The second thing that I would like to do is have my patients' fasting insulin level. I don't think that it's tested enough. I have a lot of patients who go for their annual checkup. They get a fasting sugar, fasting cholesterol. But like I said, insulin resistance, diabetes, it's on a spectrum, and we seem to just give patients a lot of reassurance when they don't have diabetes, but we're not thinking in terms of their preventive health and testing that fasting insulin level if they have risk factors. If they've been borderline for quite some time, if they've had a family history of diabetes, if they've got an increased waist circumference, thinking about testing those patients with a fasting insulin level. And then last but not least, some kind of questionnaire to screen for mental health, because it's not thought about enough and it's often not brought up organically. So if we don't bring it up organically, it should be brought up in the form of a questionnaire so it can at least be a conversation starter.
One of our thought patterns in this organization is to help create a midlife review month. So we might come back to you to collaborate on what would that look like. Because as you're talking and I'm thinking, I've done some of those, but I might have done, and actually I've done all of those, but I've done them ad hoc.
Yes.
Not regularly. So there's no ongoing review piece.
Yes.
Are there any myths that you would want to dispel around, men and midlife and health and some of the thoughts around that?
I think one of the biggest myths would be that it's, when it comes to weight loss, it's as easy as eating less and moving more. And if you're stuck, if you're failing, if you're in a plateau, you just have to do more of that. You have to eat less and less and less, and you have to move more and more and more. But if what you're doing is not working, I think it's a flag that you need to go and see your friendly GP and go and get a reassessment. Just go and let them have a bird's eye view of what your situation is, because that will help you to determine whether you do have any unaddressed medical factors that do need to be treated. Because what you might be doing is you're doing all the right things, you're exercising well, you're eating well, and it's one step forward, but you have these untreated medical factors and it's 2 steps back. So if you're stuck, definitely go and get reassessed and have that conversation.
And is every GP doctor, I know this is a broad statement,
Yes.
Because the word general means you're so general across so many things.
Yes.
Is, in your experience, is every doctor au fait with that way of thinking, or are there specialist doctors who really specialize in this area as a GP?
Yeah, so not every doctor has a special interest in weight management, just like not every doctor has a special interest in skin cancer or travel medicine, for example. Lots of GPs are general and broad, and then different GPs have specific interests as well. So sometimes if you are wanting to see a GP with a specific interest in weight management, you can have a look on the practice's website and have a look and see if that particular GP has a specific interest in weight management. It might just mean that you have a more comprehensive consultation when it comes to starting that conversation.
But for most people, start with your doctor and go from there.
Correct.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. How are you maintaining your own health?
Well, I do not currently have my own regular GP because she unfortunately retired.
Okay.
And I think it's kind of hard for GPs to have a GP who feels comfortable to see them, because they feel like, you're two magicians playing chess, and you wonder how much vocabulary that you use, how professional you are, how much you test and how much you don't test. So when I've gone to see GPs, I often feel like they're a little bit on edge, wondering. Exactly.
Yeah.
So I've always gone back to see my own regular GP, but I found out last year that she retired. So I'm on the hunt to find my own regular GP.
So is any GP listening who would like this patient?
I promise I'm not trouble.
One of the things I always like asking people is, as you get older, what's important to you changes. What's important to you now relative to when you were in your 20s and early 30s?
I think that thinking about the future becomes important. And when you're young, you think that old people are really old. So when I was 20, I thought that old people were really old. But now I already think that I'm very, very old, and I'm also preparing for the future. I think about, my financial security. I think about living in a comfortable home that can look after me into the future. That is not because I look after so many other patients. I think I don't actually want to navigate too many stairs when I'm older. I don't actually want to have a fall when I'm older. So I actually think about, how am I going to make my own life as comfortable and as easy now so that it's going to be easy when I'm older? Because no one actually wants to have a hard life, right? You might as well start having an easy life right now. So I think that, even though you would call me a young person, I would call myself an old soul. And I already am starting to think about how I can optimize my health now, how I can optimize my finances now, how I can optimize my living situation now, because we should actually be just living our best life right now so that we don't have to think aging as a negative thing. We can actually think about living our best life, living our health span for as long as possible. Why not continue living my life right now, which is enjoying my work function, enjoying my family function, having a lot of purpose, going on lots of holidays, and just not really think of it as aging and getting older, but extending this phase of life for as long as we possibly can.
I'd call you a wise soul.
Okay.
That's what I call. In fact, that's what I do call you. Neither old or whatever, but a wise soul. Speaking of the future, what do you think would the 75-year-old version of Angela Kwong be asking of you?
Yeah. I think that my 75-year-old self would be one of those cheeky 75-year-olds.
Chinky.
Cheeky. Yeah.
Cheeky.
I've met a few cheeky 75-year-olds.
Yeah.
And I think that I'm going to be one of those. And she's going to look at me and she's going to say, "You secretly enjoyed that, didn't you?" Because, my poor husband, he hears every complaint. He's like, he sees the long days, he sees the traveling for the conferences, he sees me preparing for the webinars, he sees me doing a lot. And in the beginning, when you're running your own business, it's long hours, way more than a day job, and it is a lot. But, it does tend to get easier, and I can see it starting to become really, really fun. And I think that by the time that I get to my 75-year-old self, I'll actually say to myself, you complained so much about the long hours and so much travel, but actually you were secretly enjoying that the whole time, weren't you? So yeah, I think I'm going to be one of those cheeky 75-year-olds.
I hope I'm around to see that 75-year-old person, Angela. Last question for you. Do you have any words of wisdom for our audience?
I think that you should not see aging as a negative thing. I think that you should see aging as an opportunity to create the best life for yourself and enjoy this health span for as long as you possibly can.
Dr. Angela Kwong, it's a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Pod.
I enjoy that. I've known Dr. Angela Kwong for a couple of years now, and I've always admired the way she does what she does. It's no wonder she and her business are winning so many awards. Here's some thoughts that I've been thinking about since the conversation a couple of days ago. Midlife weight loss isn't about willpower. At least it's not just about willpower. And she makes this clear. If what we used to work in your 30s no longer works in our 50s, it may not be your fault. It's probably physiology. Our metabolism slows down, our muscle mass declines, and our body's set point adjusts after years of dieting, stress, energy restrictions, etc. And for men, we need to stop thinking whether we're lazy or broken. Maybe we're just running with a different engine than we used to have. Maybe what worked before, like sweating in the gym or starving through intermittent fasting or skipping meals or whatever, maybe that just doesn't cut it. And what struck me in the conversation with her is those two hacks I'm going to consider. The first hack she talked about is moving out of the myth of eat less, move more. Well, how revolutionary is that myth? Because midlife bodies, the rule becomes fuel our bodies smarter, move with purpose, and recover deeply. And the first hack that she gave is protein first, i.e. at every meal, ensure there is a solid serving of protein on the plate, be it chicken, beef, scrambled eggs, an omelette, fish, etc. Start there as opposed to starting with what's the carb content, i.e. pizza, pasta, etc. Protein first. The hack number 2 that I've taken from the conversation is the new midlife health-oriented playbook starts with science, not with self-punishment. Angela argues that medicine often waits until diabetes is diagnosed instead of treating the precursors, i.e. insulin resistance and prediabetes. So don't wait until the numbers are bad. Get your fasting insulin tested, not just your blood sugar, i.e. ask your doctor to specifically test fasting insulin. Because as Angela said, early action can often mean fewer medications later. The second thing, and I'm really surprised by this, and I've had this conversation with a lot of people over the last 12 months, and it's the topic of food noise. This silent driver of midlife weight gain for many people. I didn't realize, and as I've been chatting about this to a range of people, a lot of people don't realize how much brain space the topic of food takes up for many of us. Not everybody, but many of us. She describes it as the constant chatter about food, i.e., what do I want to eat? What do I not want to eat? I wonder what I'll be eating next. I wonder what I'll be eating next Saturday. I wonder what my buddy is planning to put in the barbecue this weekend at his birthday party. I wonder, should I download the hotel menu and plan what kind of pasta I will have at the next work function next week? And it goes on and on and on for some of us. I did not know that that was a thing, and I did not know that I was not unique with that thing. It was a real revelation for me. And the hack that I've taken from the conversation and the hack that I'm suggesting for those of us where this is true for you is to firstly recognize the pattern. Recognize it's a thing, it's a phenomena. It impacts some people and it impacts us a whole lot more than we might realize. The loop isn't a lack of control, it's a chemistry loop and it's a habitual loop, i.e. a habit. Whether through mindful eating training or medical tools such as the GLP-1 drugs, quieting that mental noise can free energy for everything else that matters, i.e. our work, our relationships, our purpose, whatever we want to do. So the experiment here, the hack, if you will, is to try some mindful eating exercises first to become aware of how we eat, become aware of the way our mind processes information, and to see how we can quieten down some of those occurrences of that noise and make a new habit. If they don't work, talk to your doctor and see whether GLP-1 drugs are something that you want to try. The third thing that I took from this is weight loss and mental health are linked. Angela explains that GLP-1 drugs, i.e. Wegovy, Ozempic, Mounjaro, they don't fix why we eat. They only fix the volume, i.e. how much food we eat. Because their role in life is to decrease our appetite. And as the appetite is suppressed, we eat less. She also explained, though, and this is the important part that struck me, is the role that food plays in our life, and to spend time getting clear on our relationship to it and whether we want to consider changing that relationship. So the hack, if you will, is this. Instead of chasing a quick fix or a medical fix, i.e. an injection type fix, spend some time reflecting on what role does food actually play in our life. Is it comfort? Is it reward? Is it relief? Is it just habit? Where did it start? Is it a healthy relationship? And if not, what kind of relationship do you want to have? I went through that process for myself and I was really surprised for me how early in my life the relationship to food originated and why it did. And I'm now fixing or at least adapting that relationship. Angela says that without dealing with the story, the narrative behind those habits, no drug, no diet will keep the weight off. And I appreciate how she drew parallels between food cravings and other addictive behaviors like alcohol, nicotine, even obsession with work. So for me, what I've learned is midlife isn't just about changing what we consume. It might be about changing what consumes us, i.e. learn to read and understand the craving before the craving drives you. And then the last thing that struck me, and this is less to do with the whole notion of food and Ozempic, and it's more to do with her own career. And that's when she talked about purpose and how purpose can protect you in the tough times or in the times when people around you are trying to maybe take you away from where you want to go. She left a very stable and successful general practitioner career to build an online, medically supervised weight management business, i.e., to do something new, to move away from stability and experiment and try something new. And she did that because she really believes in her passion. In our conversation will prove this, that a lot of us need support in this area, and she wanted to do that because she believes in the outcome. And what struck me is, for many people, midlife offers an opportunity to try something new. There's a pull forward to do something more meaningful. But in her case, she faced cultural pressure, family disappointment, family doubt. From a Chinese heritage, the notion of face is really important, as she explained. And for her parents particularly, they were losing face because she was no longer the traditional doctor. She was an internet doctor. But she persisted. And she persisted because she has clarity of purpose. And she understood for herself that the people who love her may not understand her next move. But that's okay. They were trying to protect her from a place of risk. But for her, purpose was clear, her motives were sound, and she owed it to herself to go anyway, which she did. And now, of course, her family are delighted. So, as a summary, the conversation with Angela is not about metabolism or GLP-1 drugs or Ozempics or Mounjaro or Wegovy. It's about agency, our agency to do something different. Because health in midlife, for me at least, is not about fear, guilt, or loss. It's about taking ownership of my own biology. It's about taking ownership of habits. It's about crafting and leaning into a new sense of purpose and crafting a new sense of identity in terms of who am I now? Who is this person I'm becoming that's allowing my body to change? Who is this person I'm becoming that wants to take agency and to take control over my own habits? And with that, I'm learning that my mind can be very noisy, and my role is to quieten that, not to listen to it. I'm learning that a new sense of purpose can call me forward, and my role is to follow it, not to ignore it. And I'm learning, as per the story from Clint Eastwood many years ago, to get up every day and not let the old man in.